SEP Fanfic Readings presents 1,000 Words by Olive Juice 28. Chapter 37. Golden Opportunities.
Malfoy. I've just returned from Redland and getting Alcott set up in a flat here. He is right across the street from the Grangers and has already introduced himself to them. We are unpacking his things and happen to see Edward go out to his mailbox, where Muggles get their mail, everyone has one outside their house anyway, and decided to go say hello. I was worried they might recognize me, but he said I would have been erased with all of Hermione's memories, and it seems he was right. Edward totally bought Alcott's line that I'm his great-nephew, and that I'll probably be visiting from time to time. Jeanette came out while we were talking, so she met with him too, and they've all made plans to have dinner tomorrow night. Apparently Edward is going fishing in the morning, which means they'll have a big fry-up, and we're more than happy to have their new neighbor join them. Alcott was very pleased with how quickly it all fell into place, and the fact that he didn't have to confund them to gain an invitation. I just had to keep reminding myself to call them Wendell and Monica, which was weird, but hopefully that will only be for the next few months. While I was gone, the portrait artist confirmed the commissions for Snape's and Cedric's paintings, and said that we should be able to deliver the one to the Diggories by the end of next week. I'll be home for several weeks now, unless Alcott needs me, but he knows he can owl or flu call any time. I left several memories for him, and a pensive, as well as 3 photo albums from the Granger's house. Really hoping Hermione doesn't hate me for basically breaking into her childhood home and stealing some of her stuff. I just keep adding to the list of things I'm going to have to ask her to forgive me for when all of this is over. I'm planning to head back to Redland the 3rd week of March, just to check in on the progress Alcott is making. He said it's easier to see it firsthand than to read it in letters, although he will keep me updated that way too. Kingsley said the plans for the memorial service are almost completely finalized. I should have an order of events for the day in my hands by the end of the month, so you can see what will take place. I know you're worried about it, but really, it will be fine. You read all those letters, didn't you? A lot of those folks will be there, and they appreciate what you and Narcissa are doing tremendously. They'll be pleased to see you and thank you in person, and if anyone causes trouble, they'll have quite a few people to answer to. Your housemates, the faculty, the other students, everyone else from New Year's Eve. You get the picture. They'd be severely outnumbered. Not to mention the fact that your girlfriend is one of the scariest people on the planet when she's jumping to someone's defense. So I think you're covered. See you Thursday. Potter. Draco chuckled slightly at Harry's letter. He wrote exactly the way he spoke, blunt and honest, no flowery descriptions and rather haphazard jumping around from topic to topic and back again. He appreciated it, though. He had been wondering about Alcott and how he was settling in, and was very glad to hear the initial meeting with the Grangers had gone well. He knew that he and Harry were taking a gigantic risk with this. For starters, there was always the possibility that it wouldn't work and all of their correspondence and planning, and all of Alcott's time and efforts would be wasted. But the even bigger gamble was that if it did work, which would mean telling Hermione, and that could turn out a myriad of different ways. Both wizards assumed she would be thrilled to have her parents back, but they also knew she could be completely furious with them for not including her in the process. That was a chance they were willing to take, however, because neither of them could stomach the thought of bringing her in, only to having it fail, and then watch her go through the process of losing them all over again. They also knew how important the NEWT exams were to her, and there was no way she'd be able to concentrate on that if she knew what was going on with her parents currently. No, Draco let out a determined huff. This was the best option, and he would take whatever resulted in the form of Hermione's reaction when the time came. He just hoped that if she was angry, that she would still be able to understand he did this because he loved her, and that she'd one day forgive him. There was the added bonus that he wouldn't be alone in facing her wrath, at least. Harry would be in an equal amount of hot water, a thought that he allowed a wry snort over. Who'd ever have thought he'd appreciate having the Wonder Boy to commiserate with if the need arose? Seeing as the end results were months away, however, he decided not to dwell on possible negative outcomes, and instead refolded the letter and placed it inside an old textbook he had charmed specifically to hide missives from Harry and Alcott. It was a copy of their standard third-year spellbook that he had hollowed out, yet it still looked like a regular text from all outward appearances. The chance of any of his housemates, or particularly his girlfriend, needing to borrow the book were slim to none, but he still put a locking spell on it of his own making so that no one else would be able to open it. He was saving every piece of parchment, every letter, every bit of notes, everything having to do with Alcott was attempting, because he knew Hermione would want to understand it all, going back to the very beginning. Thinking of his favorite brunette brought a soft smile to the pale wizard's face. Though their interactions hadn't changed since the conversation on the couch a few weeks ago, he he had felt a definite shift in their relationship. He couldn't put his finger on what exactly, but he felt more certain about things, more sure of the direction they were moving in. He was still nowhere near ready to contemplate marriage or children or any of that, but the random daydreams of a future together didn't send him into a panic like they had previously. He assumed this was because he now knew she felt the same way he did, and that they intended to pursue their relationship after finishing school. Just having that certainty made all the unknowns, like a career or his place in society, much less worrisome. He felt like he could accomplish just about anything with her by his side, and he doubted that would ever change. The day had arrived for the 8th year's trip to Gringotts, and everyone was just as excited as first years boarding the boats on their initial journey across the lake. Bill had planned out and coordinated the entire schedule, and had finally resorted to writing it all down and making copies for everyone so that they could stop badgering him with questions about everything. He'd also had a brief conversation with Draco, in which the younger wizard expressed concern about being out in public for the first time since his trial, and Bill had reassured him that very few people would have access to their group. The housemates were still finishing breakfast when their head breezed through the doors to the room and greeted them with a wide smile, his typically scruffy hair combed more neatly than usual, and his traveling cloak perfectly pressed. "Morning, all!" A jumbled chorus of greetings met him as he walked over to stand at one end of the table. "We'll need to head up to McGonagall's office in about 15 minutes, so finish up and then go do whatever you need to do before we leave." Chairs started scraping back from the table as everyone took final gulps of pumpkin juice or tea, and last bits of toast were shoved in. Everyone scattered back to their rooms to get their cloaks or off to the baths to wash up. In what was probably record time, all 10 of them were once again gathered around Bill, watching him with expectant expressions on their excited faces. "Right then, off we go." He pulled the door open and ushered them into the corridor. Most of the students and staff were still at breakfast, so the halls were empty and quiet, save for their own footsteps and murmured conversations. In short order, they were spiraling up to the head's office, where the door stood open for them in welcome. "Ah, good morning, Professor Weasley." McGonagall stood from behind her desk and met him and his charges near the fireplace. "Everyone!" She nodded to the group at large and gave what could almost be considered a smile as she surveyed them all. "Your Floo connection will open in roughly 1 minute. Professor Weasley will step through first, and the rest of you will follow in pairs. Please arrange yourselves with a partner." Immediately everyone started pairing off. Hannah with Neville, Padma with Daphne, Dean with Anthony, Draco with Hermione, and Luna with Theo. That last combination caused McGonagall's brows to shoot up under the brim of her ever-present pointy hat, but she didn't comment on it, and instead forged ahead with instructions. "Once you arrive, you will step out into the office of the head cursebreaker, Daniel Carson. He will give you further direction and accompany you for the entirety of your time at the bank." She pinned them with a stern glare. "I do not need to remind you that although you are of age, you still represent this school, and I expect nothing less from your very best behavior while you are outside its walls." The 8th years squirmed slightly under her scrutiny, feeling both annoyed that she felt the need to treat them like 12-year-olds, yet also chastised as if they'd already done something wrong. In response, however, they simply nodded meekly, which seemed to mollify the formidable headmistress. "Well then, off you go." She gestured to the hearth where the emerald green flames had already roared to life. Bill turned to the group and grinned. "See you in a bit." Stepping into the fire, he firmly announced, "Gringotts," and spun out of sight. Dean and Anthony were closest, so they went next, followed by Hannah and Neville, and the pair of witches. As Theo and Luna stepped towards the grate, Luna studied him for a second before announcing, "You know, Theo, I haven't seen any Nargles around you in a very long time." The lanky brunette simply grinned, shot a wink at Draco, and pulled his partner close to his side as they disappeared. Both Hermione and Draco chuckled at the exchange as they positioned themselves among the flames, his arm wrapped familiarly around her shoulders as he stated their destination. As they spun, she caught a fleeting glimpse of a genuine smile on her favorite professor's face.